Hey everybody, it's Thursday, November 6th, 2025, and after a bounce yesterday, we saw selling again today, basically erasing all of the gains from yesterday. So the market continues with indecision and weakness, and to me, that's really been marked by the earnings that we've seen this week, where we've had several companies really providing solid earnings or earnings beats and getting rewarded with selling after the fact. So you could say one of two things. You could say, oh, the expectation for that company was very high, and even though they beat, it wasn't enough for the market. But some of these performances, like with Palantir, and I mean, even you could argue the coin call last week, Hood yesterday, they were very strong earnings reports. And that selling to me is saying that people are de-risking. They've been in the trades for a while and they are taking profits. So that is reflective of the current sentiment and the uncertainty. You know, we have the US government shutdown continuing. And until that can turn, I think we are going to continue to see downward pressure in markets for, I would say, at least until sometime next week. And hopefully we can start to see a bid and buyers step back in. I will say that a lot of charts are starting to look oversold or are getting close to oversold. They still have a little ways to go, but we'll look through that today. And that's also part of what has me thinking that we're going to need a bit more time. So, you know, doing this every day has been actually a lot of fun. So maybe I'll just continue this next week until the market can get its footing again and we can rely on those less frequent updates for trades. So let's get right into it. This isn't financial advice. Past results are not indicative of future performance. Do your own research. Okay, starting on the S&P 500, and you can see that selling that we had today. Now, this dropped actually a bit below our price action from Tuesday. My portfolio held up slightly better because of that Unity software position and also because of shorting OKLO yesterday. So that gave me a little bit of a hedge, of course. Not enough to protect against all the downside, but it muted the blow a little bit. Now, it would have been nice to stay above this previous swing low from Tuesday. Now that we closed below that and are back below this breakout range, it does set us up for potentially a move lower. And in the broader sense, in terms of this recovery from the 10th of October, as long as we stay above this swing low here from the 22nd, and that's pretty much coming in line with this next area of support at, let's just say, 6,700, just below. As long as we bounce before that point, we would still be on the way to recovery in terms of forming a daily higher low. So that would be a good sign to see. And if we go over to the NASDAQ, oh, and one thing I should mention, yesterday we were talking about on both these indices, how they were potentially setting up an inverse head and shoulder pattern. That, of course, failed on both today as we saw that selling. The NASDAQ, it is at a very similar point. Drop below those swing lows on Tuesday, and the next support underneath here, the next major zone, is really at 25,000. One thing I'm really looking for tomorrow is how is the week going to close? Just like we look to the end of the day on equities, if we see buying into the close, that's usually the professional stepping in at the end of the day. That's a sign of strength. If we see buying on Friday, particularly after a week like this, marked by a lot of indecision, if we can see buyers step in and help the price rally tomorrow into the close, that would be a much better sign for next week. If we sell off and close weak tomorrow, then we should anticipate just more challenging times ahead next week as well, where we might want to consider hedging a little bit more or taking off some extra risky positions. Okay, I'm going to go through a lot of the names from yesterday to give updates on those trades and cover a few new ones. So the first one is Unity Software, which, considering how the rest of the market sold off today, held up pretty darn well. You can't really say that that is a bearish candle from the earnings day yesterday with that massive wick to the upside. Now, we are into a bit of resistance here at the Confluence Model Center Band, and I maintain what I said yesterday about a little bit of chop here actually being a good thing for this to find its footing before it tries to attempt to move higher. I've seen too many of these where it shoots up and fails. So a little bit of consolidation building up of structure, I don't mind that at all. And for some reason, this is not my normal Unity chart, but we still have this underside support here that I'm watching as a general area as we move forward. So it would be nice to maintain this trend line, and dropping below it might be a sign that, obviously that we're going to see lower prices, but a sign also to make a decision if you're trading this shorter term. If a trend line fails, do you want to take some profits? All right, I noticed my charts were a little misaligned for the first two, but we got it fixed. Moving on to RIO. This one held up well too from its bounce yesterday from that previous couple year breakout. So this is, a bit overbought on the daily, but oversold on the 4 hour. And seeing this hold up well today was an encouraging sign. If we just go to some of the other metals names really quickly, there's still been weakness in the other metals names, like AQMS looks like it's gonna head down to 550. CLF, which I've got a little position in that I just added to today because we were getting into the next fib level here at the psychological $10 level. But honestly, just looking, and we're oversold on the 4 hour, but looking at where we are on the daily and not to the bottom of the range yet on the daily, I'm imagining that this could really get down to that $9 zone. So, still probably 10% to the downside in this, but I'm okay holding this for a bit longer term in terms of CLF. And then BHP has been holding up okay. CLF is honestly, I'm sorry, not CLF, VALE has honestly been the strongest. And it's just chilling a little bit right now after breaking out of this multi-year downtrend as well. So these are notable shifts. The question is, with the charts extended, can we get follow through on these metals names? So that's definitely one to watch. And you know what? I'm going a bit out of order here. But in terms of rare earths, REMX, where are we here? REMX is just breaking below support. So had a big day of selling on REMX. It's not oversold yet on the daily. And the next major support level down below for REMX is down here at $56. And that would be an area where I would start looking at it for an entry for a trade. So I'm just going to move that alert down here. Let's set it a little higher so we get some advance notice. And I'd be looking for that to correspond to the daily RSI dropping below 30. So I know that was a bit of a detour, but these are just some names that I'm watching, and I'm looking to diversify a bit more into metals as we get into late cycle, and commodities often outperform when we see a market downturn. Okay, on to the good performer of the day, which was OKLO, and I should go to the 4 hour chart, but just to map this out, we have our price target for the inverse head and shoulders confirmation down here at about 33 to 35. The daily RSI has more room to the downside. The 4 hour is already oversold, and we have earnings next week. So there is this one trend line underneath. And if we sell off into this trend line into earnings at 90 and perhaps see a little bounce off that, I might take some intermittent trades on this, and I could use the 4 hour as a guide. And the 4 hour confluence model lower band is sitting right around there as well. So there is very much a scenario in which we're just taking this first swing in the 4 hour on our way down to the price target, where we could bounce from this zone once, come back up to that center cloud, get in a short again, and then it could take a second swing and a third swing to get us all the way down to our price target eventually here on the 4 hour. So that's just something I'm watching to see if it makes sense to be a bit nimble with this trade. But all in all, I mean, things worked out really well. I got in right as we were testing the confluence model center cloud after breaking down into the lower band. And it's amazing how reliable these are just in terms of that repeating narrative. And if you've been in my perk classes, you hear me talk about this all the time of, okay, we take 2 to 3 swings in the upper band, center band, and then we take 2 to 3 swings in the lower band. So OKLO seems to be playing that out, and the pattern would confirm that as well. All right, Tesla, big news today. Elon got his compensation plan approved, so that was good. Some selling today, and I'm just on the short term a little bit concerned for this because we did hold this 440 level really well and then wicked below it into the close and then bounced back up during the shareholder meeting. Now, the thing that's notable here, just in terms of some subtle near-term weakness, is we didn't make a higher high today compared to our highs on Monday, and we did make a lower low, and now after hours we didn't make a higher high again. So it's showing you that subtle weakness, and there was indecision in the market leading into the shareholder meeting. Is Elon going to get his compensation package? And he did, and we couldn't make a higher high off of that. So that is notable. And if we break below 440 tomorrow, I would have to get out of my short expiry calls at a small profit, because that's just showing me some near-term weakness. And then I would fear that we would break back down to the bottom of the range, maybe to 414 or so. And then we have to see what honestly happens from there. But in terms of the RSI, it's just been stuck really in the middle of the range on the 4 hour. We did have this mean reversion spike. We haven't printed one to the downside yet. So would a correction get us that? And, could we do something where we just bounce from this zone and then continue up higher later? Who knows? But with these shorter expiry calls, I just want to be a bit more nimble, but I'm really, honestly, not doing anything with my longer term position. Okay, moving over to Hood, the selling continued today after really solid earnings yesterday. So the notable thing here too is just after this massive uptrend, we could not make a higher high here in early November. We have sold off. Now the question is, are we going to break these lows? And it looks like our clouds are already rolling over. So those are already predicting something. And just like OKLO, we're in this lower band. So are we going to take those couple swings down and then recover? It seems like that's likely right now. And the areas I'm looking to for support would be the top of this range, which is at about $117, $115 to $117, and then the lower end of this consolidation range, which is all the way down at 95. So anywhere in that neighborhood would be, for me, an area where it would make sense to add to my position again. And we just really need to take this, day by day and see if this swing low is going to break down. You could make an argument that this might just be in a bit of a symmetrical triangle, a bit of a tightening range here. But obviously if this lower end fails tomorrow, it's going to tell you pretty quickly. And then we also have our longer term uptrend that we have been in since April. So if this fails, that will give you your answer that we're most likely going to take those couple swings. And I would say just somewhere in the middle of the range around 107 is a decent area where I have this alert actually set up to consider adding to a position if you are so inclined. And you would probably be oversold on the 4 hour at that point, be getting your mean reversion dots. And if we look to the daily, where would that put us here? That would put us right in the center band on the daily, which we often see a bounce from. Now, we are on the last line of support here, actually, on the daily RSI, where, well, I guess we dip below it a little bit sometimes, but normally when we maintain in an uptrend, we bounce from that zone. And then if we break down, that's when we have our more meaningful correction. So that's another thing to watch here on Hood. Okay, since we talked about Hood, let's talk about Coinbase. And the daily RSI after that breakdown where I got out is still working its way back to the bottom of the range, but we are into key support right now, so we need to talk about it. And that's this level here at just over 290, which has been support for us multiple times earlier this year in August, and early September. So this is an area to watch. And if that fails, we have the 200-day moving average just below at 280. But if this fails and the 200-day moving average fails, it just feels like this is going to be a longer drawn out correction for coin rather than something that's able to bounce and recover right away. So something to keep your eyes on. Now, if we are looking to the 4 hour, the 4 hour does suggest most likely a near-term bounce because we have a mean reversion dot. We're bouncing off the bottom of the range, and after hours it tagged this trend line perfectly. But this is our first swing in the Confluence model lower band on the 4 hour. We know we take at least a couple of swings in that lower band. So, can coin recover from here? Yes. But the 1 day time frame and where we are in the Confluence model clouds are suggesting more downside over the next couple weeks ahead. And this is going to be very contingent upon Bitcoin. While they are diversified, they're not as diversified as in terms of a everything finance app as Robinhood is, and crypto performance is still very important. Okay, and on that note, let's look to Bitcoin. And Bitcoin sold off with the rest of the market a bit today. We are getting an after hours bounce a little bit, so we're still holding the bottom of this range. I maintain that we, from a timing perspective, are going to find out if this is bottoming out between next Monday and Saturday. So I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin just chops around. Maybe we tag this trend line. I'd love to see this trend line tested for support and then a strong move away. But if this breaks down, then obviously we need to change our stance to be more bearish and defensive. But nothing new to really report for Bitcoin, just kind of a wait and see period. If we're either going to break down from 98 or break up above 105. And then really 107.5 would be the major hurdle to get us on a more bullish path to recovery. Okay, I'm going to skip Solana because it's also just chopping around sideways just like Bitcoin. And ARM is one that I want to get into today. And I just had a busy afternoon and I missed the entries, but it tested that breakout zone perfectly again. We are in the lower band here, but things are still trending up. So this indicates that this can most likely bounce. And then the question is can we overcome this overall downtrend that we've been in right here? And that would be a fourth time breakout right here if we do come up to this. So the setup on ARM is looking good to me. And you have your invalidation just below right here. If we break below this end of the symmetrical triangle, it would be a sign to get out of the trade. But I'm going to look for an entry tomorrow on ARM, despite the broader market weakness. Okay, NVIDIA was weak today as well. And we had this really important breakout zone at about 183, 185 in that territory. So if we pull back a little bit more, seeing a bounce from that area would be ideal. Now, we can wick below it a little bit and still maintain a decent structure. And the last line of support really for NVIDIA, I would say this confluence model lower cloud, this is our POC. If we come all the way back down to there at the low 180s, and that's about at 182 right now, I would want to see a bounce from there. And that's actually, if you want to take a position on NVIDIA and it comes back down there, buying there is a perfect level because you can set your stop just below that zone, assuming you're bouncing from the confluence model center band and that point of control. And that would also have the 4-hour RSI in oversold territory. So good entry on NVIDIA. And let's just see what the daily's doing. I haven't really been playing NVIDIA, but I might just for this potential. I mean, where it is on the daily, could it push up higher? We do have earnings coming up next week. I think on the 11th, was it? No, the 19th of November. So we do have earnings coming up after hours. I'll make sure with future earnings to mention if it's pre-market or post-market. Okay, just to recap BBAI, this one, I was just watching it all day. Do I exit? Do I stay in it? And if we go to the 4-hour, you can see we're still just testing this bottom level of support on the symmetrical triangle. So that with the 200-day moving average just underneath would be telling me to get out of this soon. We do have earnings coming up on Monday of next week. And I believe this one I actually need to check on if it's pre-market or post-market. Give me 1 second. Yep, that is post-market on Monday for BBAI. So it would be nice to see this bounce and move away before that and to not be right on a point of support. But we are oversold on the 4-hour. And if we look to the daily time frame, the daily time frame is about to get into confluence model support here too. So I don't love holding into earnings. And especially with the earnings results we've seen lately, but it might be worth a hold. Now, we didn't cover Celsius yesterday, and I thought it would be a good one to cover after BBAI because this was one where I said, oh, I'm just going to hold into earnings as well because I have a position at 53. Well, this one sold off like crazy. It had positive earnings today, and the market, there were just some slight issues with the slowdown in the core brand, but the other businesses they've acquired were growing, and not a major slowdown. It was still 13% growth quarter over quarter, but this was a classic example of profit taking kicking in. Now, the double top target is still a little bit below where we are at about $33. And we did bounce off the 200-day moving average today, which was a good sign. We're way oversold on the 4-hour. And now I just need to look to potentially get out of this and see if we can get a bounce up to this next zone at 51. My entry average is at 53, so I should have just set a stop loss. I didn't need a slap on the wrist for that. But this dropped already pre-market, so I don't know if it would have even filled. But I would say overall, for how strong the earnings report was, it does feel like a bit of an overreaction. But we already saw the weakness in the chart, where on the weekly, if you have a breakout on a cup and handle pattern, and then that fails, we saw a similar thing on MicroStrategy earlier this year. And it's just foreshadows that weakness. It doesn't mean it can't do something down the road. And I would actually be interested in looking at this, assume we have a bounce and we come back down into this cluster and then start to recover. I would be interested in taking another stab at this one, but the sellers really stepped in today on Celsius. Now, since we touched on the failed cup and handle, MicroStrategy's great one to talk about next, because it had that same cup and handle setup right here with the cup handle breakout and then failed and then just daily downtrend. Now, the big thing that happened on this today is it broke its couple-year long uptrend, and I didn't have much MicroStrategy left. I sold a bunch of it here in late January of this year just to de-risk a little bit and fund more of my trading bag. So I had about 20% of my MicroStrategy holdings left. I sold them today just on this close. Now, it can find a little bit of support just below here at 230, which is all these previous lows from the beginning of this year in March and April. But below that, it would probably be a quick drop down to the next support zone at 180. And below that, really 110 to 115 would be the next area. So if this doesn't bounce and reclaim this area quickly, it seems like it's most likely going to be a bit of a painful path for MicroStrategy. Now, if Bitcoin rallies, could this recover and bounce back up? Yes, but I don't think it's going to make fresh all-time highs. And the fact that we already broke this trend line now is just showing you that there's weakness in this. And normally when this happens, even if there is a little bit of a relief rally, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure from people wanting to exit who didn't get out of their position at higher prices. And honestly, there might be a lot of bag holders that bought up in this territory here who are severely underwater and are just trying to get out. Okay, another one that had good earnings today, or a decent earnings call, was Moderna, and they actually saw a bit of a spike on that pre-market and earlier in the day before some selling. So just where we are in the Confluence Small Cloud, we took that first swing in the lower band. Now we're probably going to take that second swing, and we're still holding the double bottom structure, which my point to really pay attention to potentially exit is at 22. I don't love that this didn't have more follow through, but it also makes sense just as that first time retest that it needs to find a little bit more of a base. So perhaps this corresponds to more market weakness next week and then a recovery, but I'm ready to exit this and need to be nimble, with these names. And the daily is just chilling in the middle of the range. We already printed our mean reversion here on the daily. We're back oversold on the 4 hour. So there's no reason this can't move back up to the top of the range. Another not so great earnings reaction was the trade desk, which continues to sell off after hours. And if I just showed you the daily candle, you would say, oh, that's not too bad. The rest of the market was selling off today. It didn't do too much. Let's look at the pre-market action. And the trade desk just went absolutely wild in both directions before finding some equilibrium. So there's a lot of indecision on this, but that swing top to bottom, that was a 34% move in pre-market. And let's just go into the actual candle. I think it was when one 30-minute candle, two 15-minute candles on that earnings reaction, and it was able to recover a little bit. But just wild volatility. But the point here on the trade desk is that we did break down from a key level. We've had this double bottom that was holding at 42, and we were wondering if this here would be a bit of a bear flag that would be targeting lower prices, which would have had this all the way down at 13. But that indecision is very clear by this candle, and the volatility is clear. I'm concerned for more downside on the trade desk now after seeing a candle like this. And so we would really have to zoom out to say, okay, what's our potential next zone of support? Because we didn't really confirm this as a flag pattern to say, okay, we can trust that $13 would be a target. And I would have to say, in terms of next levels below, and let's just set some alerts here, or we can draw some horizontal levels. I would say these lows here that we hit between 2022 and 2023 at $39, that would be roughly the zone that I'm looking to now. And how close did we get to 39 today? Oh my gosh, we bounced exactly from 39 today. Look at how TA works. Past levels are providing support at that $39 level. Okay, so we have that mapped out. Let's look at some zones below that. And honestly, from 39, I would say there's not really a good support until these previous highs right here, which are coming in at 32. And that also corresponds to our next VRVP cluster, hold on, where that starts coming in. So if 39 fails, look to 32, and then that could maybe be a decent entry, but the trade desk has just been so beat up. And you know what? I can remove these upside targets from the potential double bottom, which would have been a nice perspective, but unfortunately it doesn't appear that we're going to get that in the near term. Okay, another one that broke down on earnings, and actually an earnings beat, was Block or XYZ. So we were looking at this as a potential flag with continuation. We were at support, and unfortunately that did not hold true. And we broke down massively after hours. So we broke down all the way from the 71 range down to 62. Now, where we did bounce, even though this is a massive breakdown, is where you would anticipate support stepping in terms of all these previous highs in this range from when we were forming our lows. So let's just give ourselves some levels to look out for. I would say this would be our next zone here at $60. That was at 62 right there. So we landed kind of right in the middle of these support zones for Block. Not a great sign of strength, even though it was an earnings beat. So the question now is, can it find its footing? Is it going to have a decent recovery tomorrow? I think this one's going to take some time. Even if it has a quicker bounce, this is just one of those where I could see it bleeding out a little bit more. And in terms of a price target, we could even take the width of this range here, and we could just map that out to the downside, because often these horizontal ranges do end up landing, at that eventual price point, and that takes us right about to that $60 level. So watch $60 for XYZ. That could be a decent entry. And on the daily, are we oversold? No, we're not oversold on the daily, but yeah, something to watch out for. And this RSI on the daily, you're not going to get this print until tomorrow. So check that out. Something to watch for. And maybe it can recover, but even if it bounces up now, I would imagine this zone at 70 is going to be a bunch of resistance, so it could just be a shorter term trade setup. Okay, now one more. I really wasn't watching too much today, but because they had earnings on Thursday, IREN, just on the daily candle, this is worth noting. This has been a very strong chart, but we did have this bearish, I guess not fully engulfing candle because we opened a little bit lower, but still not a great candle overall on the daily. And I believe we did recover a little bit after hours with that jump back and forth. But, even names that have been very strong are getting beat up on earnings. And I mean, kind of not a one-to-one, but a similar reaction to what we saw on PLTR. One other one I was watching today was HIMS. I've been saying it's worth a bounce play eventually. But we did end up wicking below this support zone at $41. I was saying 40 and then 35 below that. And where we are in the confluence model lower cloud now, it just seems likely that we're going to wick down to at least test that $35. So I'm just playing this slowly right now. I'm waiting for the daily RSI to reset for this to find a base again. If we are looking at the 4 hour, the 4 hour has been recovering and printing, I suppose, a bit of a bullish or hidden bullish divergence here with equal lows and in the RSI and lower lows in the price action. But this one, I think, still needs a little bit more time to recover. Okay, UPXI, not much to say. We're bottoming on the daily RSI. We're about to get a mean reversion dot, but it hasn't given us a bounce play yet. And I fear that price target of about 180 might still be in play. But yeah, continued weakness in UPXI, and that's just following along with crypto. And I should note, I'm still looking for an exit on this on any bounce for the little bit of a position that I have. Okay, and last thing for today, we'll just look at some Chinese names. BILI on the daily chart is still a little bit overheated, but we're finding support from the Confluence Model Center Cloud. We have earnings coming up on the 13th of November, I believe, pre-market. So that is one to watch there. And if we continue bouncing from the RSI at around this 44, 45 level, I'm imagining this would continue an uptrend, and then we're seeing if it can mount that fourth time breakout. So is earnings going to be that catalyst? And as a reminder, these guys are the YouTube of China. JD, I'm still in a trade on that. And it's honestly just been continuing to find support here at the Confluence Model lower cloud on the daily. So a bunch of chop. It did gap up open today and pulled back with the weakness in the rest of the market. But the Chinese names honestly have been holding up a bit better. And then BIDU, I think, had a bounce as well. And they have earnings coming up on the 18th of November. Yep. So BIDU, a fairly neutral day, open and closed at about the same price, but is looking like it's starting to recover. And BABA, which is the biggest name here, not actually as much of a recovery as BIDU right now, interestingly enough, but is finding some support right at the Confluence Model Center band. So yeah, keep your eye on Chinese names. They are holding up a bit better right now. You know what? I said that was the last thing, but we should look at some of the big tech names. So Amazon today pulled back with the rest of the market and closed the day right at previous highs from February of 25. So the question is this going to close the gap or come back down here to 232? I don't know yet. It's a little too soon to tell, but if there is broader market weakness persisting, that could be the case. Now, we did hold a couple of 4-hour candles at that level, and we have the Confluence Model Center Cloud coming in next at 239. So that's an area to watch for potential support and another bounce higher. But everything has mean reverted pretty far on the daily and the 4-hour, so this needs to cool off a little bit. But, you know, RSI can stay elevated for some time. So the strength has really been in the bigger tech names. Case in point, Google has also remained strong. And, you know, it did come in a little bit. It's in a bit of just a tightening range right now after that move higher off of earnings. But overall in the Confluence Model upper band, we're still moving around there. We do have a bearish divergence on the RSI. I'm wondering if we see some weakness in Q1, if this will provide a better entry. But right now, it's hard to get in on this one. And then, you know, I haven't looked at Microsoft in a bit, but let's see if that double top, yep, that double top is continuing to play out. So what was our target from that for Microsoft? We'll just draw it out manually real quick. All right, if we map out that double top, that would have us back down here, which makes a lot of sense at this volume cluster at 430. And we're at 497, almost 500 right now. So decent move to the downside if this confirms. So we need to break below this low, which this could do tomorrow, beneath 494. Yeah, and we're in the lower band. Even if this bounces, this does look like it's going to continue down for a bit. So gosh, if Microsoft and some of these names are a short for the next week, I think the market's in for a bit more pain, unfortunately. And then Meta, last one, just to think through this together. We are in between a couple areas of support, I would say. We hit the double bottom price target. Now, you could argue that this is a head and shoulders, kind of a double head. It's not my favorite pattern, but the price target for that would be at about 580 to 590, which makes a lot of sense as a zone where this could find support. We're at 620 right now. So the next real levels below for Meta is that psychological $600 level, which also happens to be our 382 fib level. So that should provide some support. And if that fails, then we're into this underside trend line, which aligns with our next price target at around that 580 level. So those are the areas to watch for Meta. And I imagine as the rest of the tech market goes, this will follow suit. And it's had two 20% plus corrections in a year. So two bear markets for one asset is pretty remarkable. All right, so that's it. That was a lot of charts to cover, but I think it's good to just go over some of those names. And as you can see, a lot of them look like they're close to support, but they still have a little bit further to go. So even if we see some buying step in tomorrow, that just points to a bit more time needed, a bit more market weakness. So just mentally prepare for that, have a plan for both sides of the market. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. We'll know a lot just based on how the market reacts tomorrow. And hopefully we can see buyers step in. But right now, it seems like it's not going to be the strongest day. But I'm happy to be proven wrong on that. All right. Have a good night, you guys. Bye for now.